Yeah, so we're at it. We've been in the dental industry for nearly a decade, right? And I started with the company. I was employee number 6, right? And I have a ton of experience in the dental industry of, consulting with practices, understanding a lot of practices' problems. And as a company, we started off with very humble beginnings, right? Our CEO, is based out in Houston, Texas. I'm from Houston, Texas. We both went to U of H, go Cougs. And we found out there was a problem with the dental industry in terms of doctors not able to get patients. So we started off as just a company to help get patients for offices. And as we grew organically, a lot of our doctors were coming back to us and asking, hey, can you help us with scheduling patients? Can you help us with making sure patients are showing up and making sure patients are bringing reviews and all of these things? So we kind of went back to the drawing board a few years ago and built out our Addit platform, which is focused really on some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So with our CE course, obviously we're going to be focusing on some really big themes throughout the course. So I really want everybody to kind of obviously be as interactive as possible. I'm really, really excited to get this started. Now, we do have some disclosures that I have to say. Of course, just like I mentioned, I am an employee with Addit, and I have been consulting for dental practices for nearly a decade. CU Zoom disclosure statement, it is going to be the company that's going to be handling the CE course and making sure you guys all get credit for that. So that's really important. And now, kind of getting started, right? So, understanding a little bit more about some of the manual processes in dentistry, right? For us, understanding a little bit more about how offices operate is going to be very, very critical. And we have a poll that we're going to give out. And in this poll, it's going to be a simple question, just two questions that about what you're currently doing in your office, right? So before we kind of give out that poll, I just want to give a little bit of background of what we mean about manual processes in dentistry, right? So number one is just spending a lot of time doing something as simple as scheduling your patients, spending a lot of time as doing as something as checking in your patients, correct? It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it creates a bottleneck effect, right? And it's frustrating not only for our staff, but it's also frustrating for our patients, right? Who, obviously is probably should be the at the forefront of all of our minds, right? How do we make sure our patients are just getting an overall better experience with our office, right? And what happens is, dental office staff members are being, underutilized. A lot of the offices are missing opportunities. They're losing money in terms of, not capturing all of the bookings, not able to capture specific patients that are looking for them online, etc. So the first and foremost thing that I really want to focus on is, automation is not a bad word, right? A lot of our offices, unfortunately, so what happened was with automation in dentistry, right? There were a lot of offices that, used an online scheduling system. There were a lot of offices that still obviously use some sort of like appointment scheduling and those kind of things. And what happened is for some reason it just didn't work, right? With scheduling patients, with checking in patients, with forms. Obviously when COVID happened, we had to kind of flip. We had to adjust very quickly because our patients, we were contactless. We had to make sure we were checking in patients without any, touching, etc. So patient forms had to become digital. And some people, you know, didn't do that, and we were able to, understand what that process looks like. And it's now just kind of evolving into like this the automation where, hey, we want our offices to understand that automation is a good thing, not a bad thing, right? And for the biggest thing is that it is the future of dentistry, right? And what we mean by that is, we aren't getting any younger. Our patients are not getting any younger. And now that we understand that, a lot of our patients are the Gen Xers, the millennials, and in a few years, the Gen Zers are, you know, graduating college in about 2, 3 years, they're going to get jobs with PPO insurance, and they're going to follow that path of adulthood, right, where they have to start adulting, where they have to start looking for options about their dental health and their hygiene and their oral health and all of those things. So it's really important to understand that automation is not a bad word, but it's also the future of dentistry, and we want to be able to accommodate our future patients and of course our current patients, right? And for us, what we've found is when we would consult with our clients, you know we understood that doctors and office managers and just dental offices, they know how to do their job perfectly. Like, a dentist is amazing at doing, obviously, dental work, and office managers do an amazing job of taking care of their patients. But like running an office and working at a privately owned office, and if you're a doctor and you own your own business, you're not a doctor, you're a business owner, right? And if you're an office manager and you are obviously working at a privately owned office that has patient base, etc., you obviously manage the office, but a big part of your day is making sure that your patients are taken care of and your patients are checked in properly, etc. So technology in the sense of your dental office is so important, and it's not just the technology, but it's also the automations behind the technology. So very, very important to understand that. And for us, the what we found out is when dentists were running their business, this was a huge gap in our meetings with them, right? They did an amazing job of making sure patients were taken care of. They did an amazing job of making sure when patients finally got to their chair, they had great chairside manners. They did an amazing job of diagnosing patients, etc. But outside of that, there were huge gaps and holes and discrepancies revolving around the operational part of their business, which is getting patients in, which was making sure patients are being checked in properly, right? Which was what we talked about today, right? So if 50% of us in this call are currently manually scheduling patients, that right there is, I would probably say, spending about 5 minutes per patient to schedule them, correct? And then the second part of that is if we're still using paper PDF forms, if we're still using paper forms in the waiting room, that's another 5 minutes, right? So if we're on average spending about 10 minutes per patient just to get them scheduled and checked in, which is, of course, we talked about, is a big part of your operational process in the office, you know, that compounds over time, right? An average dental office will typically see about 10 to 12 patients a day, maybe more, maybe less, depending on, your office volume. So if we're spending that time, that's a solid hour and a half per day, and just doing something where if we were able to automate that, we can spend more time with patients in the office. We can spend more time with making sure patients are, being taken care of, and answering questions regarding the treatments or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of benefit to the word automation. And that's why we really focus on how, hey, it's not a bad thing, it's actually a good thing. And if we can embrace that, then it's going to really help us understand where we can go in our day-to-day operations, and then how we can, honestly, shift the focus of, hey, let's spend more time with patients in the office and less time with patients that are outside of the office. To be completely honest, the patients that are in your office are the most important, right? And that's where we want to kind of focus our mindset when it comes to this. And the only way we can do that is if we can automate, and we can, take this poll. Again, I'm just going to give everybody a reminder, right? So right here, if we go back to the list, excuse me, how does your practice book appointments right now? Half of us, actually none of us, do it at all, automated. Every single person on this call, or I'm sorry, in this CE course, they do it in some sort of manual fashion, right? Appointment request on the website and calls, correct? Nobody has some sort of automated scheduling system. And that is the first part of like your patient check-in process, correct? And then if we go back to the list, here, about 75% of us, have some sort of paper forms or downloadable forms, downloadable PDF forms in the office to where, of course, that is going to be challenging for patients to get checked in properly, if especially if they're just waiting in the waiting room. So this is a huge thing that we're going to be discussing today. So automation is the future of dentistry, of course, right? So let's talk a little bit more about statistics, right? So statistics are very important for us to understand because if we don't have the data behind the decisions we're making, then we're probably going to be making decisions out of the blue. And we don't want to ever do that, especially when running a business. So 40% of appointments are booked after business hours, right? That's a huge stat. And 26 of online appointments are either for same day or next day appointments, correct? 33% of patients prefer booking appointments by their phone. We all have smartphones. And of course, 54% of appointment bookings that occur during working hours are made on the go, right? What does that tell us, right? It tells us that, our patients are looking for offices that have a easy, simplified way of booking an appointment. Something as simple as booking an appointment, right? To kind of go a little off topic here, my wife and I, we usually have a weekly date night, right? So what unfortunately, I'm the person that is tasked with this, with this burden of I shouldn't say burden, but with the burden essentially of picking a place, then making sure it's good and all of these things, right? So it's stressful for me at least. And one of the things that I do love is that most of the restaurants have a very simplified booking system, right? So when you look at a restaurant, you go on Yelp or, Open Door, I'm not Open Door, I'm sorry, Open Table, and you just look up a list of restaurants, reviews are right there, right? And, at a restaurant, they pretty much mastered the way of like scheduling their clients, right? And in a restaurant, they have a very complicated booking system. Party, how many people are in the party? Are you sitting inside, outside, table size? So many different variations to scheduling, but they figured it out and they make it so easy to where something as stressful as date night, I can just kind of take that off of my plate. The same concept is essentially it's the same concept in dentistry, right? So when you can make your schedule as easy as possible, then most of your patients that are looking for you online are going to prefer an office that can just quickly schedule them. And that's really important because when you're understanding where most of your patients are coming from, they're coming from on an online resource, right? They're either finding you on Google, they're finding you on social media, they're finding you on, a search or whatever the case may be. Some more statistics on appointment scheduling, right? 94% of individuals would more likely choose providers that offer some sort of online booking options. And we kind of talked about this earlier, but more than half of our patients are millennials and Gen Xers that say, hey, I would switch to another dental office if they can just have a better, easier booking system. And again, almost half of your patients are finding you through some sort of like social media or some sort of online presence. So if you want to really tap into that market and really understand how to make your future patients, or even to some extent your existing patients, new patients as well, a better and faster way to schedule, the scheduling system has to be good, right? And there are a ton of options out there, which we'll definitely talk about today. But understanding how to schedule them and making sure that there is a solution out there that can get my patients scheduled into my book a lot faster, right? Making those calls, the appointment request process, it's a process, right? So when we consult with a lot of our offices, we talk to them a little bit more about, what's your scheduling process look like? And, the answers that we get is a very manual process. So let's just say, let's use the appointment request as an example, right? This is what 90% of our clients or 90% of the offices that we talk to tell us about their online scheduling process. When it comes to appointment requests, which a few of you have, based on the poll, have said that this is how you do your appointments, right? So number one, go to the website. There's like this appointment request button. Now, it's a request, it's not a booking. So the patient is inputting all the information. making it seem like they're actually scheduling an appointment, right? But it's not really scheduling an appointment. They're just giving you date and times and basic information and all of that stuff. Request comes in. And when that request comes in, we ask our office managers and we ask our doctors, where does that request typically go? And, a lot of times they say it goes into the email. Email is great. Now, when it goes into the email, what happens is a lot of times it gets buried with all of the other junk, right? And that's where most of the junk mail gets buries the request. And then a lot of these requests are essentially lost. And because they're lost, they're not they're opportunities that are not able to be booked into your system because of an appointment request process. That's just one process. And again, we're talking manual processes, right? So patient intake statistics. So this is the second part of it, right? So we've kind of talked a little bit more about the patient scheduling process. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the stats on patient intake. So patient intake is a pretty big process when it comes to your office. Again, it's part of your check-in process. You have to schedule them, which we talked about, and then you have to make sure they're filling out paperwork. They are checked in properly, right? And just like, again, referring back to the poll, a lot of us are using downloadable paper forms, PDF. Some of us are actually using digital forms, which is great. So again, understanding that, right? So some quick stats here, right? So 97% of your patients are frustrated by the waiting room experience. And that goes without saying. If I'm a patient, and this happens to me all the time, right? I go in and I feel like I come in early, like 15 minutes early, 10 minutes early, and I'm still waiting an additional 15 minutes just because for whatever reason, right? And obviously, meaning we know the real reason. I'm sure there's, you know, um, one or two patients came in late, the doctor just got really busy, or the operatories are just kind of finishing up, or whatever the case may be. But from a patient perspective, all they're thinking about is, "Oh my god, I've been here for almost an hour." But in reality, it was like 10 minutes, if that, right? But again, just understanding your patient experience, because this process, this manual process, not only gives your office, frustrated looks in the waiting room, but it's more work for our team members. So if you're a doctor, I'm pretty sure your managers, your office managers, your front desk coordinators at some point, probably complained about doing all this paperwork and putting it into like your Dentrix system, putting it into like your EagleSoft system or whatever system that you guys have, because it's paperwork, right? 84% of people believe wait time is either somewhat important or very important to like the overall experience at a doctor's office. And that is true, right? Whenever you go to a doctor's office, the first thing people will say, "Oh my god, I had to wait. Oh my god, I had to wait." So, like, that is a big part, and that intake process feeds into that wait time. And of course, this is a pretty scary statistic, but 30% of patients have walked out of an appointment due to a long wait time. And I'm not saying this happens a lot, but it does happen, right? And this is again just going back into the manual processes that we see happening today in our offices. And that's again, going back to what we're talking about, automation is not a dirty word, right? When we look at automation and when we look at some of these stats, it's a very, very big problem that we see in the industry. And if we're not doing one of the two, we should be doing at least one, right? Which is, hey, let's make it as easy as possible for patients to come in and get them checked in. So if I'm scheduling my patient the way I want to schedule them, which is possibly either a manual process or maybe just stick to my calls or stick to appointment request, then at least bare minimum, I should have some sort of system to where I can check them in before they come into the office, right? But, again, we're seeing that this problem is happening consistently where offices are having a manual scheduling process and a manual intake process, which, again, just like we talked about, is a domino effect into just longer wait times, poor patient experience, more work for our staff, right? And just telling our staff to do twice the work where we can just completely, automate that for them. So really, really important to understand that. Really important to understand, what we're trying to do here and how we can improve and some of the ways to kind of improve your office and some of the benefits of the automation. So, and again, just going back into the history of dentistry, there were a lot of softwares that came out and said, "Hey, we can do online scheduling." And unfortunately, it just didn't really have that deep integration into like systems like Dentrix, like Open Dental, et cetera. And at the end of the day, what was happening, it was like double, triple booking patients, and it caused the office staff to work 2 times, 3 times harder just to book those patients because of the lack of integration into your practice management system. And that essentially shut down any conversation about online scheduling in the dental industry, right? Which, of course, is 100% completely understandable because, as an office, especially if you're an office manager or even a doctor, you don't want to have to pay for a software that's going to make you, work twice as hard, right? The entire concept of automation is to make sure that you're not working as hard and honestly not working as much. So, we definitely understand that. So that's the number one thing, right? There's so many new software now that have the integrated, sync with your practice management systems. And one of the key questions to ask is, do you have a read and write permission for my scheduling system? So, like, for example, if you're using Dentrix, right? And you're doing your research and you're trying to see what systems are out there for online scheduling, you come across a company that does that. One of the biggest things you want to do is you don't want to get into the issue of, oh, yeah, we can go ahead and schedule your patients. But they also need to know the availability of your office, right? So that's where the read and write permissions come into play, where when you're evaluating and researching different companies that can do online scheduling, those are some really important questions to ask because that's where you can kind of get the satisfaction and get like the reassurance that, okay, my schedule is open and this software is going to only show my open availabilities. It's not going to show a bunch of times that are just arbitrary times that have nothing to do with my office and we're not even open at those times, etc. So you really want that two-way sync, right? Read and write permission. So that's something I would really focus on, right? And then and how do online scheduling tools prevent patients from taking over? That's exactly how, right? So with online scheduling, if you have the right scheduling tool that can read and write what's sitting in Open Dental, what's sitting in EagleSoft or Dentrix or whatever the case may be, well, you have full control. You are going to show what's available based on your openings. Very similar to the analogy that I talked about with restaurants, right? They're only showing tables or they're only showing what is open. I have a lot of friends in the restaurant industry and I have a lot of friends that own restaurants, and they say, whatever we post online, that's like 50% of our reservations. So they're not even posting their entire reservation because the other 50% is just for walk-ins, just normal flow of traffic. So again, it's super custom. And these software companies in the dental industry that can do online scheduling with the read and write permissions get very technical and very custom. Second question is, one of my biggest hurdles is getting buy-in from the owner. Any suggestions? So Tabitha, that's a great, great question. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this today in our call too. But getting buy-in from your owner is the number one thing, right? So just understanding a little bit more about the problems, right? As a business owner, like if you're an office manager and you're trying to get your doctor to, make a change, right? And you want to make the change. You just don't know if the doctor is going to be ready to make that change. You have to talk their language, right? And what I mean by that is, they're the owner of the business, right? And what they're looking at is, how is this going to help my business grow, right? Sometimes, as an office manager, we may not think the same way as a business owner because, to be completely honest, we don't own the business, right? It's not our money. But we are tasked with the job of managing an office. So, like, your day-to-day operations, that's your job as an office manager, is making sure the operational workflows are working. Because if you have great operational workflows, guess what? The office is going to make more money, because if we can schedule patients faster, more efficiently, and in a much more uh, better way, we can increase our patient bookings. right? And then that'll allow more and more patients to find you online. That'll allow more and more patients when they land on your website, they can schedule directly into the system. When they go on your social media and they go on your Facebook page or your Instagram page and they see your Instagram page and they don't have, and there's literally no button to schedule and it's just, hey, give us a call. Guess what? Those are your patients that you can tap into now with having a integrated online scheduling system, which means the more patients that are booked into the system, more patients that are actually showing up, and then more patients that are being added to the patient database of the office, which of course feeds into your production, which feeds into more opportunities to grow your business, right? A typical patient to a dental office is worth, I mean, based on the ADA over the course of 1 year, it's about anywhere between 750 to $1,000, right? That's just their first year. That doesn't even include like if they bring family members. That doesn't even include if they refer, which we all know patients refer. We all know patients bring in their, husbands or wife or kids or whatever the case may be. And if you acquire that patient, it opens the door to just a whole new set of revenue for the office. And that's how you kind of talk the language of that your owner or your business owner or your doctor will kind of listen, right? And it's really important whenever you have, I know a lot of my office managers, they meet with the doctors on a weekly or monthly basis, whatever the case may be. In those meetings, constantly bring up some of the challenges that you're facing when it comes to like your day to day, when it comes to like your operational processes. And again, as you bring that up, you can also bring in the concept of, hey, this can increase X, Y, and Z. So, Tabitha, I hope that was helpful. If it was, give me a thumbs up emoji. If it wasn't, you know, you can't do a thumbs down emoji, but I won't be happy. No, I'm just joking. Awesome. I love that. I love that. Cool. So, um, perfect. So it looks like we have a couple of questions. Any other questions? Just put them right here where it says Q&A. And again, time permitting, we'll definitely answer those questions and kind of tackle any, feedback that we have. So let's kind of get back into it. So we talked about obviously some of the basic statistics and all of those things. Now let's talk a little bit more about ways to automate your practice and of course, benefits of the automation, which we did talk about, but I really want to dive deeper into this. It's because when you're automating your processes, the first thing that we've been talking about is your check-in process, correct? So your check-in process is so critical to understanding how to get your patients to schedule forms and reminders all in one process. So we talked about scheduling, we talked about forms, right? Now we're going to talk a little bit more about your reminders because I would probably go out on a limb and say 90% of the industry has some sort of software that does their texting, that does their reminding, that does the confirmation, that does any of those, all of those things, right? But again, that's just one third of your check-in, right? So you need patience when you're trying to make sure patients are in the office. So your number one goal is, hey, I need more cheeks in the seat, right? And in order for me to get more cheeks in the seats, I need to make sure we're scheduling, checking in, and reminding patients. So this entire three-prong approach is called your check-in process. That's what we say here at Added is we need to be able to automate your entire check-in process with one workflow where all three of these are kind of in sync and all three of them are working together to make sure patients are checked in properly and getting the reminders, and in the reminders they're getting a form to fill out, and then as soon as even before the forms they're scheduling properly. Then when they're scheduled properly, the reminder confirmation text goes out with a link to start filling out their forms digitally and automatically, right? And that's huge because that part of your entire business, which we just talked about, is going to really help understand how to check in your patients. Then the second part of your business workflow is how do you check out your patients? Right? We spent a lot of time talking about checking in patients, but what happens after a patient is checked in? They go through your process, you might manually schedule them, you get them to fill out paperwork, and then of course they actually show up and they come in for their new patient consult, and during the new patient consult you guys figure out that they have a cavity, and you present treatment and etc, and now they're ready to check out. So with your checkout processes, this is a big gap that we have seen in the dental industry, right? Where if you're ready to check them out, you swipe card or you get some sort of like, confirmation. The issue here is now a lot of these payments don't post into the ledger, right? That takes time. And especially if you're seeing a lot of patients, your checkout process can be time consuming, right? And what we mean by that is just constantly posting. And sometimes you have to batch post and sometimes you forget, which means now the data in your Dentrix, your data, the data in your open dental, et cetera, it's kind of off, right? And then when you're running reports, that data, because it was off, you're not getting really good data. So your checkout process is just as important as your check-in process because that's where you're able to make sure your patients are being that they're paying you properly, it's being recorded properly, and then now because you had a streamlined check-in process, we can get those reviews, we can get the happy patients to refer, to bring in more reviews, right? And it's just like this entire cycle that we've seen when it comes to your check-in and checkout processes, right? And ways to automate your practice, on an operational side, treatment plans, email campaigns, tracking phones, and all of these things are very critical pieces of your office. So just kind of giving you an example of what we just talked about. Patient comes in and it's a new patient consult, and obviously the hygienist doctor come in, does whatever they do, and we found out that there's a cavity, and now we are presenting a treatment to them, right? How are we presenting that treatment? Because if 50, 70% of us are still using paper forms, we're probably presenting a treatment plan on some sort of paper, correct? And when they're accepting the treatment plan, how are we checking them out? Do we have to wait until they're completely done and then now at the end they can swipe their card, or can we just get them checked in where we present it to them chair side, show them the treatment plan in a digital way so that way we're not spending a lot of time, and then when they feel comfortable, they like it, they see the images, they see how the treatment looks like based off of the tooth or whatever the case may be, and they're ready to go, you can just get them checked out right then and there, right? So just doing that entire process and entire flow all in one place is very, very critical, right? And when you're, again, going back to your patient check-in, check-out processes, this is where we're able to get in patients, faster, make sure patients are not waiting in the waiting room and, spending too much time in the waiting room, getting them into the seat as fast as possible. And then with the time that we're spending, and I'm sorry, saving, we can focus on that patient, that one-on-one patient interaction, right? The soft skills that a lot of our office managers are really good at, but we're not utilizing it because they're so busy with just influx of calls. They're so busy with influx of scheduling and all of that stuff. So now we bring that time back into your office. So now when you have those really good one-on-one conversations and building rapport with your patients, guess what? It's naturally your patient acceptance, your treatment acceptance rate goes up because they feel comfortable. They feel like, they're part of this dental family. They feel like they're part of this practice. And it's those types of interactions that are made possible because of really good automations, because of really good operational workflows in your office, right? And once that happens, it's a cycle, right? Now they're getting you guys reviews. Now they're, posting reviews on social media. Now they're bringing in their family. They're bringing in their daughters and sons and husbands and wives, and now referring friends. And again, goes back to that cycle. New friends come in. Oh my God, it was so easy to check in. Oh my God, it was so easy to schedule. Oh, paper forms? Absolutely not. I don't have a printer at home. I have to download this PDF and then I have to print it out and bring it into the office. Oh my God, I don't even have a printer. You know what? It's fine. So I just got off the phone with the office manager. She said I have to be there 15 minutes early. Ah, okay, I'll try. Day of the appointment, they come in on time or 5 minutes late. How often does that happen, right? If I'm a patient of yours, you're going to hate me because I'm either on time or I'm like a few minutes late, which means it's creating that bottleneck effect, right? Which, if you're using paper forms and if you're using downloadable PDF, it's almost the same thing, in my opinion, where they're filling out paperwork in your lobby, right? And that right there is time, right? And then they're coming in, you have to check them in, you have to wait until everything is checked in, you got to put everything into Dentrix or Open Dental. That entire process is time consuming, right? And that's where we need to understand that, hey, we need to be able to automate things, right? And with automation, there's a lot of benefits, right? Some of the biggest benefits that we're going to talk about today is it's going to save you time and money. You're going to be able to book appointments faster, collect payments faster, organize your schedule better, right? Give the patients the conveniences they've come to expect, right? That's, post COVID, especially post COVID, that's an expectation. It's like, look, I just want to go in and go out. I don't want, to talk to anybody. I just, when I say talk to anybody, I don't want to spend a lot of time in the waiting room. I just want to see if I can just get everything done before I even go in, right? And that's the expectation that we want to really set when it comes to number one, understanding the automation tools that are available for you, right? Saving time and money. Tabitha, just kind of going back to that original question that you talked about was, how do I get buy-in from the owner? This is exactly how you would get buy-in from the owner, right? It's like, hey, you're paying me X amount every single month, right? If you really come down to it, I'm an hour. If you're paying me hourly, I'm spending an hour to 2 hours a day doing something this software or a software can do. And if I can take that time and put it towards patients in the office, I can help you get a treatment acceptance rate of 10% more, right? And that's what our office managers, that's what's our treatment plan coordinators or front desk coordinators, especially office managers. I talk to so many office managers, and their skill set is literally face to face. It's person to person. It's making that patient feel good. It's making that patient feel at home, and it's making that patient, feel comfortable. So when it's time to present any sort of treatment, it's an easy yes, right? That's how you save time, and that's how you save money, and that's how essentially the more times you do that and the more bookings come in, the more chances you're giving your office manager, meaning yourself, if you are an office manager, more opportunities to make sure patients are, coming into the office and accepting treatment plans and all of that stuff. So it's a huge benefit to the office. And I feel like a lot of our offices, especially doctors that are so busy with the dentistry side of things, that they fail to understand that, hey, we also need to understand the business side, right? And as an office manager, that is your domain, is the operations behind this entire practice. So it's really, really important to do that. So benefits of automation tools, right? It's really, really good. Now, there are some challenges, right? So this is where it gets a little tricky. So when you're looking at, understanding some of the challenges of automation tools, that it does come with challenges, right? Number one, you got to research, right? There's a lot of research that has to be done here, right? So when you're researching different automation tools, it can be time consuming, right? And it's funny because, when we, even if so I'm talking to office staff, if office staff understands that, hey, I know that this is a problem and you're going to the doctor and the doctor is saying, and you're telling the doctor, hey, this is my problem. And the doctor's like, okay, how do we solve it? Right? That takes time, right? You have to research how to solve that problem, right? That's number one. Number two is getting your team on board with this change, right? This is probably one of the biggest hurdles you're going to face, right? It's because no one likes change, right? If you're used to doing something, you don't want to change. Even sometimes, believe it or not, even if it makes your life easy, but because you're so familiar with it, you'd rather do those two extra steps. You'd rather spend 2, 3 minutes manually copying and pasting data from a paper form into Dentrix. You'd rather just do that. Sometimes you'd rather just, it's not a big deal. Trust me, Fahad. I do it all the time and I'm used to it. I can just post the payments myself. I just remember to do it every single time. Oh, don't worry. It's a simple call, Fahad. I just make the call and I schedule the patients. It's pretty good. I got this, right? And that's good. But of course, if we're talking about how to automate and if we're talking about how to be a lot more efficient in our business operations and in our operational workflows, there has to be some sort of change. And getting your team on board is I would probably say, the biggest challenge, right? It's not even just getting your team on board, it's getting your team on board, training them, and getting them and buying them into the change is pretty difficult, right? So that's what I would say is some of the challenges with automation tools, right? The second thing that a lot of our offices face is something we call here at Addit subscription fatigue, right? Many systems are costly and may not have all the features you're looking for. So what's going to happen is you probably will need to adopt multiple systems, right? Which goes back to the challenge of getting your team on board, because guess what? If you're using two, three systems, you need to train your staff on two or three systems. You need to get your staff to buy in on the concept of learning three systems. Man, it was probably hard enough to get them to learn Dentrix, right? You probably spent so much time getting them to learn Dentrix. You're like, how am I supposed to get them to learn, two other softwares that's going to get us scheduling, that's going to get us reviews, and that's going to do this. So that's a big hurdle, right? That's a big, big hurdle that we are seeing in the dental industry right now, right? So systems not only cost money, but it takes time for them to adopt multiple systems, right? So when you look at the industry as a whole right now, so you have systems that do all of your communication. Remember, we talked about how I probably go on a limb and say 90% of the dental industry has some sort of software that communicates with their patient through text, like Weave, RevenueWell, Doctable, Lighthouse, Solution Reach, and the list goes on, right? So now, if you want those companies to streamline your operations, right? Just kind of streamline that operational workflow and like automate your check-in process. Unfortunately, all these companies just don't have the technology or the software or even the features to do that, which means you're going to have to go to other companies that do that, right? So then now you're looking at, okay, let's just say hypothetic, I'm picking on Solution Reach, and I love them. They're a great company. They're like one of the industry pioneers in dental. But if you have Solution Reach, and if you're looking for a solution for, pun intended, for online scheduling, Solution Reach may not have that. And if they do, they may, charge you a little bit more money. That kind of goes back to the cost. But then you're gonna have to look at other systems like a LocalMed or a ZocDoc or whatever the case may be to do something as simple as scheduling your patients, right? And then the second part of your check-in process is obviously getting your forms digitized and making sure the forms integrate into EagleSoft, Open Dental, Dentrix, etc. Well, then guess what? You have to get a third company, right? A third company is going to be someone like Yappy, great company, huge presence in the dental industry, and they, pretty much mastered paper and digital forms, right? So that's again kind of like the dance that you have to do to make sure that you can centralize your communication, you can streamline all of your operations, and then, understanding reports and metrics and all of those things where you can help boost that production, get that treatment plan on treatment acceptance rate as high as possible. So then, in order to give that type of service, you're going to look at analytic tools that are giving you the numbers on how many patients you're checking in, how many patients are not showing up, how many patients are constantly canceling on you, etc. You're looking at another software, right? So it's really important to understand some of the biggest challenges that you're going to face when you are evaluating the automation tools, right? So the good news is we have some tips. We have a lot of tips that we can help you, that can really kind of give you some relief in terms of doing that research. So obviously some really quick tips, right? Consult with your team and listen to their pain points, right? If you're a doctor, understand a little bit more about what your front desk, what your office managers and treatment coordinators are experiencing, and how can you solve their problems, right? Identify the processes you want to automate. We talked about a lot of things to automate, but sometimes some dental offices just don't need a scheduling system, and that's completely fine. but we may need a really good check-in process for forms. I'd rather, again, these are questions that you should be asking. Like, I do need to have my patients checked in. My staff is working too long to get patients checked in with paper forms. They are honestly just spending a lot of time with mindless data entry. And I've heard them say that multiple times. So I may need to kind of look into tools that can do that. Right. And then, of course, outline requirements for each process, just like we talked about right earlier today. When you're looking at, what you want to automate, what does that look like? You know what? Yes, I do want to schedule my patients. I do want my patients to get a text message that has a digital, like a link for a digital form, blah, blah, blah. I do want a system that has really good analytics that can show me, how many patients broke their hygiene appointments the last 60 days. And then I want to send out a mass text message to them to bring them back in a lot faster. So again, set goals and a desired timeline for that. Research tools and narrow them down to like the top 2 to 3, tools. Set demos. This is a really, really important thing, is just do walkthroughs with a lot of these companies to learn more about features and functionality and limitations, right? Involve the people that are willing to make the change, right? Sometimes you may need to kind of talk to like your counterparts. If you're an office manager, talk to your scheduling coordinator and say, hey, do you think we need to really do this before presenting it to the ownership team? Maybe we should look at this, because it seems like you have a lot of problems with, scheduling, because it's just so much work for you. So kind of involve, other people and key stakeholders in your meetings, right? Whenever you're doing these walkthroughs with other companies. And of course, discuss the decisions with your team and address their concerns before you commit to anything, right? Before you commit to anything, before you make any change, you want to make sure you have buy-in, right? You want to make sure every single person on the team understands what this change looks like, and how is that change being implemented. Again, really, really important, because there's a lot of factors when you are choosing automation tools, right? You need to make sure it's ease of use. You need to make sure it's easy for everybody to use, correct? That's why it's important to bring in more people in this decision making process. Make sure it's flexible and it's scalable, right? Make sure it has the features and functionalities that your team needs, not just one person, your team. So if you have a scheduling coordinator and you have accounts receivable person, and then you have a treatment coordinator, those are three different roles in your office. And understanding each person's problems needs to be obviously the forefront in when solving these problems, but understanding, what does my treatment coordinator need in a software? What features does that person need? What features does my billable person need? What features does my front desk scheduling person need? So understanding all of these and making sure that you have all of those questions prepared when you're doing that research. Compatibility and integrations are huge, right? Just like I talked about earlier, when something as simple as online scheduling, you want to make sure it has those integrations, right? Read and write permissions that can look at your schedule, make changes to your schedule, pull your schedule, and publish whatever is available based on your preferences, which gives you full control. Huge. Implementation process. What does that look like? If I'm gonna come here and get my treatment coordinator, my front desk, and everybody, bought into this idea, I need to understand what the implementation process looks like. I need to understand how long it's gonna take. So timeline is a very crucial part of this entire decision-making process. Is this gonna take forever? Is it gonna take a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months? What does that look like? And implementation, a lot of people think, implementation is, hey, I'm just going to get you guys on and then we're good. No, it's implementation is, hey, I'm going to get you guys on and I want to make sure you're adopting it, you're using it, and it's helping. And then that's the timeline that you want to kind of set for yourself, right? So if you're a doctor looking for changes, get your team members, right? Get them more bought in, and then get them and give them and understand the timeline for everybody, right? And of course, during the implementation process, definitely understand what the support's going to look like and beyond, obviously, right? Support's a huge part of it, right? Because technology is always not going to work. We live in a very technologically advanced society, and even your iPhone glitches at times, right? Even your iPhone drops calls, right? And it's not going to work 100% of the time. So when there are glitches, when there are mishaps, when there are issues with the software, you want to make sure support is there. And one of the ways you can kind of identify that is during the implementation process, how well that support process looks, right? If it's really good response time, if someone is, attending to your needs, if we can get like a quick resolution to problems, and if the problems are solved, we're good to go. It's the small kind of nuances when it comes to like your implementation that shows that you have the support that you need post implementation as well. Obviously, $1 million question is cost, right? Cost is really important. And just like we talked about, it can get pricey if you're kind of stacking a bunch of different software onto one. So cost is very important. And understanding, hey, if you're a business owner, do I want to invest on this on a monthly basis or an annual basis? A lot of companies do typically give you like discounts for paying everything up front, and there are a lot of benefits to that. Or you can kind of pay the increase rate and just kind of go on a month-to-month basis. And if you're going to be paying it on a monthly basis, you can kind of see how the software works, see how your staff responds to it, and see what that looks like. And this goes without saying is value, right? Is this valuable to my office, right? I'm spending, God, I don't even know, like five, 600, $1,000, whatever the case may be. Does that reflect the value of what I'm investing, right? And that's huge. So online scheduling, is this actually helping my office, and is this actually increasing my revenue? If it is, let's do it. Better analytic system that gives you good KPIs and metrics and all of that stuff, is that really making me make decisions better? Yes, then yes, that's the value, right? And when you're looking at considering choosing a lot of these tools, an all-in-one system is always good, right? Seeing if you can find a system, and there are systems out there that can do a lot of these processes in one place, right? So it's really important to understand that, and it's really important to understand, you know, how you're going to implement these tools into your process, whether you go with 3 companies or whether you go with 1. Ideally, you would want to go with 1 company, right? And understanding that, there has to be a way to understand implementation, right? Implementing automation, it's not easy, right? It's time consuming and it's going to take time. However, it's easy when you have 1 tool, right? If you have 2 or 3 different tools, that's where it gets tricky. So you want to make sure you're communicating with upcoming changes with your team. So if you, again, you did your research, you understand the tips for researching, you've done the tips for implementing, and now you made a decision, whether it's 1, 2, 3 softwares, whatever the case may be. Of course, all in one is always the best. Communicate those changes with your team, right? You want to be upfront with your team about, hey, we just signed up for 2 different softwares, and this is what the implementation looks like, and this is what we need to get this going. Because the faster I can get this going, the faster I can make your life easy, the faster the office is, running smoothly, and the faster we can kind of, make and become successful, right? We like calling that person a change champion. So identify your change champion within your team. And if you're a doctor, it doesn't necessarily have to be an office manager. It could be somebody else, right? It could be, scheduling coordinator. It can be a treatment coordinator. It could be your business manager. Whatever the role may be, that is your change champion. And if you're an office manager, it doesn't always necessarily have to be you. It can be someone else that you can rely heavily on and trust, right? Set clear expectations with your team and obviously the companies you're working with to implement tools. So obviously you want to make sure that, hey, whatever companies that you're hiring, hey, this is our timeline. We need to be up and running at this time. Can that happen? Can we make that happen? And then understanding that timeline, setting the right expectations with your team as well. Huge, because if we understand that, then we can create champions just like we talked about, and then we can, advocate and keep the implementation process going. Solidify an implementation plan, whether it's short or long. And one of the things we really stress is test, test, test. make sure things are working. Prioritize training up front. A lot of companies have training. A lot of companies, um, do a lot of training post onboarding, pre onboarding, whatever the case may be. Take advantage of that, right? You want to monitor progress and you want to optimize it. And of course, reevaluate the decision every 3 to 6 months, maybe even longer, right? That's a good way to kind of see how you're going. Meet with your team whenever you have quarterly meetings and stuff. Understand, hey, how did this software work? Is it working? Is it not working? How is it making your life easier? When we were looking at making the change, we were experiencing this problem. Has that problem gone away, or steadily gone away? Like, what are we looking at? These are really good questions to ask your team post onboarding, post implementation. And of course, just always going back to test, test, test. Make sure it's working. Training is huge. I think that's a big part of anything that you do, is making sure, all of your team members are trained with software. And again, when you have one software trained, it just makes it easier. Monitor progress and optimize. These are huge, huge tips for implementing a lot of these tools and kind of getting your staff on the same page of this. So we're gonna do a second round, like a soft stop. Love to open it up for questions. This is, we're right at 8:10, 8:08, 8:10. We have about 15 minutes, give or say. We have a few more slides. We need to give you guys the credit code and all that good stuff. But before we do that, wanted to kind of open it up for questions. It looks like we have some questions. Amazing. I love it. Okay, so Tabitha, we did answer that. Angela, you asked about paying. Yeah, how do I avoid paying multiple companies for automation tools? Again, it just goes back to your research, right? Researching companies that can do everything all in one is very critical, and kind of goes back to what we were talking about whenever you're doing the factors when considering change, right? If you're doing one tool, it's easier to implement. If you're doing two or three, obviously, there's time consideration to that. We have another question from Tabitha. Do you have any suggestions for an all-in-one? Yeah, of course. There are a couple of companies out there. Addit is definitely one of them. I know there's like like not Next Health. I'm sorry. Dental Intel is another one that does a lot of these systems in one place. They may have a couple of features, here and there that don't really um, integrate, but Addit is one of them. You can look at other ones like DI, Dental Intel, a few others as well. So when you're researching, you want to refer back to, like, again, what you're looking for. What are your goals? Because if your goals are just doing one or two things, then you can do those research. You can, as you're researching, it just really depends on what you're looking for. So that's a really good question, Tabitha. What we're gonna do is this slide, this actual presentation, we're going to give everybody a copy of this presentation, just so that way you all can kind of see. And in this presentation, Tabitha, it's going to help you whenever you're researching. These are a lot of the companies out there, right? When you look at dental from an industry perspective, this is what you're looking at, right? So when you're researching, we're pretty much giving you guys a lot of tools to kind of research. So this is where we can start off. And of course, at the end, we're going to give you guys a few more, takeaways, a few more things that you guys can take with you. We'll email you guys some cool resources that we have as well. But yeah, so obviously, any other questions, we would love to field them. I feel like, if there are more questions, we would love to get them answered. I'm going to go back to the slide for the credit in just about maybe another 30 seconds to a minute. But any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. This entire presentation, just like I said, we will be emailing it to you in a PDF format. So if you always want to fact check me, here's your references and citations. A lot of the stuff is from the ADA and a couple of other, really reputable sources when it comes to like the statistics and stuff. All-in-one systems, right? So Tabitha, you had a great question about all-in-one systems. You know, when you're researching, you always want to make sure it can bring in and address all of the things that you're looking for. If you're looking for an automated check-in process, if you're looking for analytics, if you're looking at a good phone system and checkout process system, that's the research that you need to be able to do. And this is, what we offer, right? So Addit is an all-in-one system to simplify automation, right? We have a couple of options. A lot of times, our clients and new clients don't need everything, and we can definitely customize it based off of your need, whether it's checking in your patients or checking out your patients or analytics or, a better phone system, whatever the case may be. This is where we can definitely help. So when you're researching, do not hesitate to reach out to us, because in our post CE course resource guide, you will definitely have some really cool stuff where you can kind of show your team, take a 2-minute self-guided tour of what we can kind of do for your office, right? You can experience at it without even ever doing a demo. So there's a link here that we're going to be sending you, and we'll also send it to you in a post CE course email, so you can actually just test drive at it and just kind of see it for yourself. And you have options to kind of pick all of the different integration partners that we have, like Dentrix, Open Dental, Eaglesoft, etc. And you can kind of see how everything will update and automate into your system. So this is a really cool resource. I would highly encourage everyone kind of do. It's 60 seconds. I mean, it's not. I say 60 seconds. Angela says 2 minutes. We always argue on this, but I have to obviously agree with her. It is a 2-minute self-guided tour, and it kind of shows you a little bit more about what we talked about, which is our automated check-in process, where you can kind of schedule, get patients checked in, and text them all through our one flow. And then, of course, we have a guide to going paperless, right? How to finally ditch the clipboards and cabinets, right? This, when you're making that decision, if you're ready to make that decision, these guides really help. I mean, it's completely free. And again, we're going to be sending that to you, but it gives you an idea of, hey, if you're ready to make that decision, here's a quick overview of how to make that decision. Automate your intake process. If you are ready to make an even bigger decision on, what, I think I want to do this. I think I want to take the jump and really automate my entire office from scheduling to forms to reminders to confirmations, etc. Then this is where you can come in and do that, right? So your guide to automate your check-in process, you can easily download that here. And these are some just quick resources. We'll be sending this to you again, and we really, really. Again, thank everyone for your time. We really hope this was beneficial to you all.